Welcome to another episode of Sri Lankan Understanding, and we are coming to you from the Mount Lavinia Hotel. Most of the time, whenever we talk about Sri Lanka, there are perceptions about our little island nation, and I thought maybe this time we set some records straight. And rather than talking about what is wrong, let's start talking about something that is positive and right about the country as well. I often joke about the fact that Sri Lanka is fabulous if you really want to find leadership material, because we've gone through 30 years of war, businesses didn't close down.
True.
We went through a massive financial crisis soon after COVID, companies didn't close down. And even after all of this, we seem to be doing quite well. Now the question I had was, A, why don't we celebrate it? And B, why don't we have these in our textbooks? Every single management program that you can think of, whether it is done in Sri Lanka or abroad, will have case studies from the Walmarts of this world, from Coca-Cola, from Burger King to McDonald's. We don't have Sri Lankan case studies. So I want to start there, and I know both of you have tons of stories to tell on organizations that you've been first-hand with, but also organizations that you have learned from. Can we start out with maybe two examples? Patrick, I'll start with you. Something that is worth telling.
Sure. Now say, if I start from where I am today, the Kandalama Hotel. Kandalama Hotel is a unique masterpiece created by this fantastic architect, Jeffrey Bawa, who took complete shift in terms of architectural thinking few decades ago. And that was a pure case study that any MBA student should study in terms of how do you take up a challenge and convert that into an opportunity, and that opportunity into a business success. As Kandalama Hotel started, Sri Lanka 30 years ago, exactly 30 years ago for this year, Sri Lanka did not have even the standards to say, if you're building a large property closer to a water body, what are the parameters that need to look at? So the leadership team that was within the company, Aitken, Spence at that point of time, together with this fantastic league of ladies and gentlemen who was spearheading the project, had to come out with own researches. And to date, Sri Lanka uses, those are some of us benchmark standard in terms of the boundary levels, how do elevate and how do you construct something, how do you study water patterns for a period of year before you commence. And obviously with any new project, there is resistance because people hardly come to know what exactly the core. They are privy to only what some other would say, and then based on that they started acting. But how this company acted, reacted and established Heritage Kandalama what is today, which is an architectural masterpiece, one of a kind in the world, where even today, after 30 years of being built, now you hardly see a hotel. If you travel around, if you even fly above the hotel, you hardly see a hotel because the jungle has completely taken over the building. And today, if a drop of rains falls to the mountain, it just straight goes to the lake without it being stopped by any part of the building. Unless it's being stopped by a natural stone, it just flows through. So such initiatives have hardly any literature. And these are stories that we try to tell for the clients that we come across, but you really don't have, it's never been mentioned. And now say you go and sit in public areas of this hotel, it's on the cultural triangle where the weather is very warm, but it's designed in a way in terms of its wind channels. You really don't need air conditioning in any of those public places, and you don't sweat.
Correct.
Sometimes in air conditioned places we sweat, but correct, there you don't, because it's thought through in terms of how the natural wind goes through. It's known as Kachan wind, so that Kachan wind travels through and it automatically cools down the building. Obviously there is air conditioning in spaces that is enclosed, but it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful case for any architectural student who's coming out from any part of the world to study. How do you marry nature into a building, and how do you take a challenge and convert that into an opportunity and into a business success? Today, where the entire country goes through low periods, Kandalama is blessed with 80%, 90% occupancy throughout the year. That is because the location is unique, the product is right, the product positioning is right, and the teams who worked on it have elevated and build a business case out of it. So people really wanted to travel and stay. It is a destination itself, and a bucket list item. So that is a good starting point, I believe, to show. The challenge is that maybe being a lot of leadership literature comes out of the Western world, and all people who talks about leadership or success, it's easier to refer to available literature rather than creating literature, I guess. Absolutely. And that probably is one primary reason why we don't hear so much of success stories that is available in Sri Lanka.
At least for our students to consume.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Davina, yes.
Yeah. So I think you touched upon when you started off saying, during COVID. So I probably pick up something that I can share. How resilient as a nation we are, and as companies, and as leaders, the leadership in the country, Vidusha. Because the former place that I worked for was a conglomerate, and predominantly about 60 to 70% was into automotive. As you know, there was huge restrictions in terms of importation of automotive and spare parts into the country. So at the time, everyone, even the employees and everyone, thought that business would crash. It was beautiful to see how the leadership got together and kind of put things together. Even during the financial crisis, how the company emerged in working together, taking different leaders coming up with different strategies and ensuring as a company we kind of thrived, and looking at different avenues which we never looked at. Although we had IT in any of our companies, we didn't look at capitalizing on it. I think majority of the companies, and so was my former company, looked at elaborating, looking CRMs, looking at systems and how people came together. So for me, I think Sri Lanka as a nation and as leadership, we thrive when we're really bad.
True.
And if you look at the 30 years of war you were saying, right? And how victorious we came up. And if you look at tsunami in the past, right? When we fall is where we get up fast. And I think as leadership, as organizations, I think there's a lot of areas to kind of talk about, especially in the Sri Lankan context.
And I think one of the things about that is the fact that somehow in Sri Lanka, I might be very politically incorrect when I say this, but I think the private sector carried the country through.
Absolutely.
And I think we should give credence to that.
Absolutely.
True. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
And for some weird reason, we don't necessarily talk about it that way, right? Because the economy ran with literally no input.
Absolutely.
In that sense.
Yeah.
But just the question of why do you think we don't write about this in academic journal papers or even just common literature? We do PR, yes, but we don't necessarily write case studies. And I've always wondered why, because Sri Lanka has a rich heritage of writing things down. I mean, we have writing from 2,500 plus years ago, so it's not something that was new to us. We are not only an oral tradition country. Why do you think we don't write it down? The Brits did this really well. They wrote down everything, and so we have something to refer back to, and they continue that. We somehow stopped writing things that were authentically ours. I think the only things that survived were the Vedaput and the recipes, if you like. So they continue to this date. You want to find out how the Hatmalu is done, I think we have enough literature on that.
Sure.
But when it comes to businesses, we do have organizations that has survived and thrived after 100 years plus. But before you answer that, let's go to a quick break and we'll come back with answers to why we haven't continued that. Welcome back to Sri Lankan Understanding. Before we left off, we were asking the question, why is it that we don't continue our tradition of writing things down? Why do you think that is? Why don't we write it down? And
maybe one reason is that Sri Lankan, I mean, we are predominantly a Buddhist country, and the Buddhist literature and Sri Lankans, all of us are molded by it, immaterial of what your religion is. And there is a level of humility that all religions teach us, and we have been kind of always told not to brag about yourself, taman gana kiyanna epa, and all of that.
Monkey praising its own
monkey
tail.
praising its own tail. Aren't you ashamed to go and talk about yourself? It probably is inculcated into our system a lot.
Correct. Correct.
I guess that's also is a reason, because
It is.
though we are very proud about it, we may talk
It's very
about
private.
it. It's very
Yes.
private, yeah, and that's kind of is looked at as the right thing to do, rather than going and talking about it. That could be the starting point of it, as I was thinking about it, but it doesn't. None of that should prevent it coming into academic, because it's always good to teach, and we've been a teaching nation. We have shared our lessons across centuries ago, throughout the centuries. So I think it's absolutely vital. The one reason why I think it is not being done in the scale that it should be done is that, and probably the people who create these journals or case studies or literature for studies is also probably it's easier to refer available literature and
Correct.
available cases that is tried and tested, rather than creating. I mean, I'm sure you know how difficult it is to properly write a case study
It is.
and to use it.
Yes.
So maybe one reason is the whole humility element of how being brought up. The other element could be pure laziness.
Correct. Davina, yes.
Just from my point of view, what I feel is, I'm just taking some points. One, Patrick said, probably it's a cultural way of, not wanting to take credit. On top of that, I do see with Usha, probably we do not want to share good practices.
Also, correct.
Also, because,
Correct.
predominantly, majority of the companies are private companies rather than listed companies. So maybe you feel, saying, sharing, probably you're sharing your secret, but which is not, because you can't copy from one company to another.
Almost
And
impossible.
also the other reason I would say is, but I do see different research papers with Usha coming up in different professional bodies.
Correct.
And the other reason could be that because we have a lot of foreign universities in the country, so they would probably want to take more international examples to it.
Very true.
And again, taking a point from what he said, maybe we don't want to market ourselves. Number one, to me, when we say we market ourselves or go out there to the globe, is we need to carry our country brand rather than me as Davina from Sri Lanka.
Sure.
That's probably what we need to be doing. So if we do take that message out as organizations, not being confined to our own
Industry
name,
or the
industry, and apparel industry is doing it well.
Sure.
I mean, apparel industries, I don't want to name the companies, but it's out there in terms of, some of the publications and things like that in case studies and all. So I feel, although some of the Sri Lankan companies have gone global, probably that's one of the reasons in terms of, I think it has to go with the name of the country, because we're a small island.
Correct.
So that is what I see.
No, it's very true, and I want to borrow from both of you, because there's a dark side to this whole cultural piece also. I still remember growing up, we had traditional doctors, Ayurvedic doctors who practice, and that never gets shared to someone outside of the family.
Sure.
It's very tightly
Tight.
controlled, and 9 times out of 10, sometimes it dies with you.
Yeah.
If the next generation doesn't have a person who is capable of doing it. It's very rare that you find that someone from outside of the fold that actually comes and learns it and then disseminates it.
True.
So I think there's that dimension also, and that might be true for organizations where you feel this is our IP. If we actually mention this, everyone might start doing it. I have always wondered whether that holds true, because if that were in that sense, most of the case studies that we generally study could be copied, but copying something that somebody has done for 30 years isn't easy in a day or two, even if you read about it, because there's a lot behind it. But stemming from it, what can we do from an academic perspective, since you touched on the fact that, it is not easy to write. And I do know that university rankings are largely based on how much of new material you put out. What can we do to encourage universities to come and take a look at what we do in an organizational context and write?
one great way would be to strengthen the practical element of it. Now, say if creating literature is a difficult process, and also obviously there might be a certain amount of IP rights you really don't want to share, and there is certain amount of credit to that belief as well.
Of course.
Because that's sometimes that is your market edge.
Absolutely.
So one great way that I've seen it working well is in terms of transferring that current tacit knowledge into the academic is to create partnerships in multiple ways. One way which I've also tried and tested during my previous work working with universities is that you partner the research programs of the university.
Correct.
So you give one of your genuine cases for the universities to work with. In the process also transfer some of your tacit knowledge.
Correct.
Into say how do these recipes get created, how do you work on some of these elements, say stemming from the fact that Sri Lanka went through a challenge in terms of importation. So one activity that we did is how do you replace some of these imported items with local produce.
Correct.
So we when we went into the research, we partnered a university and we realized there is a whole heap of lentils and grains that we can use in Sri Lanka that can alternate a lot of imported items. So much so even varieties of fish. There are so many varieties of fish that otherwise we would have imported that we can use. You may need to change the processing methods a little bit more to get the right texture, but it's still a fantastic alternative. So one easier way I feel is to create partnership between academic and practicing businesses in terms of working together, even if it does not mean that it's a thesis level work, but
Sure.
it is something that can be done in terms of internships, in terms of research topics, in terms of practical exposures and knowledge sharing. There are few Sri Lankan companies who does it as well.
Correct. And in fact, I think the encouraging thing is it is happening a little bit more now.
Yes.
There are a lot more universities that are interested in finding out what industry is doing. There are academics who actually come and understudy a process or a phenomena.
True.
And thankfully, I think a lot more MBAs are now encouraged to actually do something useful.
Yes.
So on that note, let's take another quick break, come back and ask about the question on what can we do to not only encourage universities, but our own employees to take that, because there is a branch of research called action research.
Yeah.
And that helps professionals like ourselves to go into the academic domain as well. But we'll take a quick break and we'll be back. Welcome back to Sri Lankan Understanding. When we left off, we did actually look at how industries can help academics, but also at the same time, how we can take onus of it. How open do you think Sri Lanka would be to give our executives or managers a little bit of time off and say, go to campus, find out how research is done, come back and actually do research, so that we start building our own material, not only for the consumption of academics, but for our own consumption, because sometimes some of the best practices that we've done in the past is never known by the rest of the organization and for future generations. So when history repeats itself, we always go back to zero and start from there. Rather than that, why not document it ourselves?
So in terms of looking at internally, Vidusha, I think we can create in the organizations itself little ways of sharing knowledge within the organization and also cross in the industry, because there is nothing that you can copy from one to the other. If I'm to look at more from an industry perspective and looking at in getting into the universities, the companies that I have worked with has always partnered with the universities, and we do let go our employees go do research, and we take a lot of masterpiece from them and make them a part of it and make them entrepreneurs out of it. So that way, I think both ways it has kind of helped work. And also looking at now even the local universities and both foreign universities, there's a lot of practical work that gets done through case studies or projects.
Correct.
Rather than before.
Correct.
And also a lot of academics also do come into the organizations to understand the processes and how it works. So I have seen, because I work with the universities, where the lecturers themselves, professors themselves start using Sri Lankan material, Sri Lankan examples rather, because there's an open space in terms of learning. And if you look at with AI coming in, I do see the name of Sri Lanka and the good work that we do in little pockets will definitely go out.
It is mainstreaming, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the good news. It is being mainstreamed.
Yeah.
I do know that we are coming towards the end of our segment. So quickly before we end up, we started with some good practices which never gets mentioned. During the break, you mentioned one. Let's end with 2 more practices that we should be truly proud of.
Sure. So Link Natural Products, being a company that produces quite a lot of good quality, serious, natural ingredient base, what they do is 1 day a week they bring in traditional practitioners into the facility and discuss what they've used to do over the period of time. And there is a very scientific method of recording it, getting the samples produced, and then they have this fantastic R&D facility, probably one of the best in the world, definitely something best in this region. And they get broken down very scientifically and developed into formulas that can be bulk produced and quality controlled and keep the essence of it, keep the natural values of it, but can be commercially produced. So that is, I thought, was a fantastic way in terms of how do you bring in traditional knowledge, commercialize
and
modernize it and make it available for the day-to-day consumer. Otherwise, how many of us have time to go and sit with a Vedamata and get,
and make it ourselves with the traditional way? It just won't happen. Absolutely. And once again, that kind of thing documented will probably become a case study in itself.
True.
One last one to share. I still remember you doing some work with universities on documenting some of the best practices around women, for example.
Yes. So if I'm to take a large apparel company in the country is MAS. If I'm to take the Go Beyond program, it kind of widespreaded among the employees, and I think it helped the whole ecosystem outside of it to enhance the women entrepreneurs. So is my current company, Hela Apparel Holdings, which we have 2 beautiful programs which we help our own employees call, it's the Lear program, which we, during COVID again, which kind of started off to help entrepreneurship, and also Diri Darua program, which we help through scholarships, which we ensure the employees retain and the employees looked after and their extended family as well. So those are some of the good practices, I think, as companies, and we are very open in terms of sharing in forums, and well, it has helped us to get into the regional forums as well with Usha Farm to kind of, so as organizations always sharing good practices, they learn, we learn out of them. So that's something that I would kind of always encourage.
No, absolutely, and I think Global Compact picked up on the Go Beyond program long years ago and showcased it, and that was probably one of the first major case studies that were done around the Sri Lankan apparel trade. And I think it helped take away the stigma to say that we are one of those sweatshop type operations that are happening in Sri Lanka, because that's the general perception that people have. It's only when people turn up here, and unfortunately most of them are tourists, so they never see the inner workings of an organization in that sense. But it's only when people walk around our facilities that they realize that we probably have some of the best of kind anywhere on the planet. But once again, we don't do enough of marketing ourselves, so we remain obscure rather than mainstream. So I think the key takeaway for me has always been that I genuinely believe, and this is not because I'm a Sri Lankan, I guess I am biased, and I think we should be biased, it's okay. I do believe that we actually have some fantastic practices that we should celebrate, that we should write about, and we should mainstream, because if an academic who's studying best practices around apparel, best practices around the hotels, best practices even in retail, you might find that some of the best practices are actually here, but it's never known. So I think it's time to put that out there, make sure that we write enough. If anyone's watching from universities, take the time to visit some of the factories, some of the industries, and make sure we write more about it, because whatever gets written gets retained for life and for generations to come. So on that note, thank you very much, both of you, for being here, and I sincerely hope that this sparks off a little interest to mainstream writing about Sri Lankan organizations and the best practices we have, because I think we do have a lot to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you.